Stop for a moment, not because something urgent is happening, but because something quiet has been happening your entire life. A feeling you've never been able to name. That subtle sense that something about reality doesn't quite add up. That life feels rehearsed, familiar, yet incomplete. You were taught how to survive. You were taught how to obey time, money, rules, expectations, but no one ever explained why. Deep down, you've always felt like you were remembering something rather than learning it. This isn't imagination, and it isn't coincidence. Most people mistake this feeling for boredom. Some call it depression. Others drown it in distraction. But in truth, it's something else entirely. It's the echo of a choice you once made, before you had a name, before you had a body, before you forgot. Think about this carefully. Have you ever wondered why certain moments in your life feel inevitable? As if no matter what you did, you were always going to end up there? Certain people you couldn't avoid. Certain lessons that kept returning in different forms. Certain pains that felt strangely meaningful. We're told life is random, that we are accidents of biology and chance. Yet nothing about your inner experience feels random. The fears you carry, the strengths you were born with, the struggles that shaped you, they form a pattern, and patterns don't emerge from chaos. They emerge from design. Long before modern psychology tried to explain trauma, long before philosophy debated free will, ancient thinkers asked a far more dangerous question. What if consciousness doesn't begin at birth? What if life isn't something that happens to you, but something you enter knowingly? Imagine this for a moment, not as belief, not as religion, just as a thought experiment. Imagine consciousness as something vast, not confined to a single lifetime. Imagine awareness existing before identity, before memory, before fear. In that state, there is no survival anxiety, no social pressure, no confusion, only clarity. From that clarity, experiences are chosen, not randomly, but intentionally. Growth is not accidental. Challenge is not punishment. Difficulty is curriculum. And if this were true, then the life you're living now is not evidence of failure, but evidence of courage. Look at your life honestly. The things that hurt you the most, did they also shape your depth? The moments you wish never happened, did they awaken parts of you that comfort never could? Pain, from this perspective, is not meaningless. It is transformative friction. Most people resist this idea immediately, not because it's illogical, but because it threatens the identity of victimhood. If your life was chosen at some deeper level, then helplessness dissolves. Responsibility returns. Not blame, but authorship. And authorship is terrifying, because it means your life is not waiting to be rescued. It is waiting to be understood. This explains something important. Why you've always felt older than your age. Why shallow goals never satisfied you. Why comfort feels suffocating instead of safe. You weren't meant to simply pass time. You were meant to experience something specific. And here's where the forgetting begins. If you entered life remembering everything, every intention, every lesson, every reason, nothing would feel real. There would be no discovery, no faith, no transformation. Certainty kills growth, so the mind forgets. Not because memory is erased, but because it's buried. Buried beneath language, beneath conditioning, beneath fear. Yet forgetting is never complete. Fragments leak through, in déjà vu, in unexplainable attraction or aversion, in that strange sadness you feel when nothing is wrong, in moments of silence where you suddenly feel watched, not by something external, but by something within. This is why distraction is so powerful. Noise keeps you from noticing memory, and modern life is very noisy. But notice this. When life slows down, when you're alone, tired, honest, the questions return. Why am I here? Why this life? Why these challenges? Most people suppress those questions because they don't want responsibility, but you're still listening, which means something in you is ready not to escape life, but to reinterpret it. If your life were a message you sent to yourself, what would it be trying to teach you? If your struggles were assignments, not mistakes, what skill are they developing? Strength, compassion, discernment, detachment? Nothing you're going through is arbitrary. And the more you resist this idea, the more life repeats the lesson. That's the quiet intelligence of existence. It doesn't force. It invites. And here's the unsettling part. The moment you accept that your life has intent, you can no longer live unconsciously. You start seeing patterns instead of problems, signals instead of suffering, direction instead of chaos. This doesn't make life easier. It makes it meaningful. And meaning is heavier than comfort, because meaning asks something of you. In the next session, we'll go deeper, not into belief, but into the psychological process of preparation, how consciousness moves from clarity into limitation, why certain lives demand more pressure than others, and why forgetting was not a mistake, but a requirement. For now, sit with this question. What if your life is not random, but remembered in pieces? And what if the feeling you've had your entire life isn't emptiness, but recognition? There is a moment in every life when the old explanations stop working. You do everything you were told to do. You follow the rules. You make the right choices. And yet, something still feels misaligned. Not broken, not wrong, misaligned. As if your life is technically functioning, but spiritually off course. This is not failure. It is friction between who you appear to be and who you were prepared to become. To understand this, we need to look at something most people never question. Why are lives so different in difficulty? Why does one person face loss early, while another seems protected? Why do some people feel called to struggle, while others avoid depth their entire lives? If existence were random, this would be chaos. But if existence were intentional, this would be design. Imagine for a moment that consciousness does not rush blindly into life. Imagine that before limitation, there is overview. Before emotion, there is perspective. Before identity, there is intelligence. From that vantage point, a life is not judged by comfort, but by what it can teach. Ease teaches very little. Pressure reveals everything. This is why growth never feels gentle. And this is why certain people are born into lives that demand transformation. Not because they are punished, but because they are capable. Think about it. If you wanted to develop courage, would you choose a life without fear? If you wanted to develop compassion, would you choose a life untouched by pain? If you wanted wisdom, would you choose a life without consequences? Of course not. You would choose resistance, not because it feels good, but because it works. This reframes something critical. The challenges you face are not evidence that something went wrong. They are evidence that something was entrusted to you. And here is where many people resist, because this idea removes the comfort of blaming the world and replaces it with the weight of responsibility. But responsibility is not cruelty. It is power. From this perspective, your life is not a punishment chamber. It is a training ground. This explains why certain lessons repeat, why you keep encountering the same type of people, the same emotional wounds, the same inner conflicts. Life does not repeat itself to mock you. It repeats itself to refine you. Until you see the pattern continues. This is not mystical, it is psychological. Awareness ends repetition. Unconsciousness sustains it. This also explains something else. Why intuition feels stronger than logic at certain moments. Why you sometimes know something without evidence. Why certain paths feel wrong even when they look correct on paper. These are not accidents. They are residual alignment signals, fragments of an inner compass that existed before social conditioning. But here's the paradox. If life were too aligned, if everything felt smooth and obvious, growth would stop. So confusion is built into the process. Uncertainty is not a flaw. It is the mechanism that forces conscious choice. This is why forgetting is essential. Not forgetting facts, forgetting certainty. Certainty would turn life into performance instead of participation. So the mind enters limitation. Identity forms. Memory narrows. Fear becomes real. And suddenly, the experience is authentic. This is where meaning is earned rather than remembered. But something interesting happens here. Even in limitation, guidance doesn't disappear. It becomes subtle. It shows up as discomfort when you betray yourself, as restlessness when you settle for less, as anxiety when you drift too far from alignment. Most people misinterpret these signals. They think something is wrong with them. In reality, something is communicating with them. This is why ignoring your inner resistance leads to numbness, and why honoring it leads to growth, even when it hurts. Your inner conflict is not sabotage. It is correction. And here's where purpose enters the picture. Purpose is not a job. It is not a title. It is not a destination. Purpose is the theme of your development. Some lives revolve around courage, others around truth, others around breaking cycles, others around awakening others. The form changes, the theme persists, and the theme is always revealed through pressure. Ask yourself this honestly: what struggle has shaped you the most? That struggles is not random, it is instructional, and the fact that you are still here, still searching, still questioning, means the lesson is still active. But there is another layer. Purpose is not imposed, it is accepted. This is why resentment blocks growth. Resentment says, this should not be happening to me. Alignment says, what is this trying to develop in me? The difference between these two questions is the difference between suffering and meaning. And here is the hard truth. No one can live your lesson for you. Support can guide, love can help, knowledge can illuminate, but experience must be lived. This is why shortcuts don't work. This is why wisdom cannot be downloaded. This is why transformation takes time. And this is why distraction is so seductive, because distraction delays responsibility, but delay does not cancel the lesson. It only increases the pressure later. Eventually, life always asks again, and again, and again, until awareness replaces resistance. The moment you stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is being formed through this? Your life changes direction. Not instantly, but decisively. Because at that moment, you stop fighting the curriculum. And when you stop fighting, energy returns. Clarity increases. The fog begins to thin. In the final session, we will confront the most difficult part of all. Why remembering is frightening. Why awakening disrupts identity. And why most people, even when presented with truth, choose sleep. But also, why some don't. If this session resonated with you, if you felt something click rather than just understand, make sure you subscribe. Not for notifications, but because the final session completes the pattern. And once the pattern is seen, it cannot be unseen. There is a reason this knowledge is unsettling. Not because it is dark, not because it is dangerous, but because it removes excuses. The moment you begin to remember, truly remember, Your life stops being something that happens to you and becomes something that responds to you. And that shift is terrifying, because remembering does not feel like comfort. It feels like responsibility returning to its rightful place. Most people think awakening feels like relief. In reality, it feels like exposure. You can no longer hide behind roles. You can no longer blame circumstances indefinitely. You can no longer pretend that drifting is destiny. This is why forgetting is protected, not by some external force, but by the ego itself. The ego's primary job is survival, not truth. Truth destabilizes familiar identities. Truth dissolves stories we've used to cope. So when remembrance begins, resistance follows. Doubt appears. Mockery appears. Distraction intensifies, not because the insight is false, but because it threatens the structure you've been living inside. Think about this carefully. If your life has intention, then every choice matters. If your challenges are formative, then avoidance has consequences. If your awareness shapes your path, then unconsciousness is not neutral. It is a decision. This is why awakening is rare. Not because truth is hidden, but because most people don't want the weight that comes with it. They want comfort without responsibility, meaning without effort, identity without transformation. But life doesn't work that way. Awareness demands participation. This is where the final barrier appears. Fear, not fear of pain, fear of becoming, because becoming means letting go of who you've been pretending to be. It means releasing identities built around trauma, letting go of stories that once protected you, stepping beyond familiar suffering into unfamiliar responsibility. And strangely, familiar suffering feels safer. At least there, you know the rules. But remembrance does not destroy you. It reorganizes you, slowly, quietly, irreversibly. You start noticing patterns you once ignored. You feel resistance sooner. You recognize when you're betraying yourself. And ignorance is no longer available as an excuse. This is the cost, but it is also the gift. Because once awareness stabilizes, something remarkable happens. Life stops feeling random. Events feel connected. Encounters feel purposeful. Obstacles feel instructional rather than cruel. You begin to sense when you are aligned and when you are not. Not through external validation, but through inner coherence. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. It becomes honest. And honesty changes everything. You stop seeking salvation from outside. You stop waiting for permission. You stop negotiating with fear. Instead, you begin responding to life directly, not perfectly, but consciously. This is what remembering truly is. Not recalling images or past scenes, not mystical certainty, but a shift in orientation, from victim to participant, from passenger to navigator, from confusion to curiosity. And this is where the leap happens. Not at birth, but now. Every day you choose awareness over autopilot. You repeat the original courage. Every time you face truth instead of distraction, you reaffirm the choice to be here. Every time you act in alignment despite fear, you remember who you are beneath the conditioning. And here is the final truth. You were never meant to remember everything at once. That would overwhelm the human experience. You were meant to remember just enough to walk forward with integrity, just enough to choose consciously, just enough to live deliberately, just enough to stop betraying your own evolution. And that is happening now. If something inside you shifted during this series, if the ideas didn't just sound interesting but felt familiar, that's not coincidence, that's resonance. And resonance only occurs when something true meets something already present. So ask yourself this, honestly, what part of your life are you still living unconsciously? What lesson keeps repeating because you keep avoiding it? What version of yourself is waiting patiently for you to stop running? You don't need to force awakening. You only need to stop resisting it. Because the moment you begin living with awareness, life responds, not by removing difficulty, but by making it meaningful. And once meaning appears, everything changes. If this series stirred something in you, if you felt seen rather than entertained, leave a comment, not for the algorithm, but as an act of acknowledgement, a signal, because the moment you articulate awareness, it stops being abstract and starts becoming real.